All right, let's get rolling. Thanks everybody for being here. This is our last day, and of course, we're being bitten by the demo monster right out of the gate. Thank you, Discord. It's going to bring that to a different screen. And let me just jump into the right channel in case people, you don't want to see this, in case people do jump onto Discord. Bear with me a second here. This is our okay, cool. Now I'm going to come back to this slide, so if you haven't snagged the prerequisites, don't worry about it. We're going to come back to it. But generally speaking, Node, Python, curl. Make sure it's Python 3. Nice to have is Snyk. It's a free account, but not required. And I'm gonna scoot that up. Okay. So just by way of introduction, my name is Micah Silverman. I run a DevSecOps acceleration team for Snyk. That tells you nothing about what I do, but I do workshops like these, among other things. I'm a software developer. I've been writing in Java for 27 years. Please don't hold that against me. Any Java developers in here? Haha, nice. Who's writes JavaScript in here? I do too. Awesome, excellent. How about Python? Okay, cool. Lots of us, excellent. So in the challenges, we're going to see in just a minute that one of them is JavaScript based, one of them is Python based, but that's kind of not the point. This is an introduction to CTFs, and in CTFs, they're going to throw different languages at you. Maybe there'll be a Go challenge, and you've never touched Go before. What this session, CTF 101, is really about is kind of looking for the clues and getting those searching skills and kind of probing around the corners of systems to see what kind of vulnerabilities we can find. So for most CTFs, it's not a prerequisite that you know a particular language. I'm also an author. I co-authored this book just in time for that technology to be irrelevant, but it's something I'm still proud of. I contribute to open source. I lead a DevSecCon chapter. If you're not familiar with DevSecCon, it's a great organization. It's a worldwide organization. I founded the first US chapter. It was outside of the US for a much longer time than it was inside the US, but it brings together developers, DevOps, security professionals. We do meetups all across the world, and they're almost always hybrid, which means you can drop into a DevSecCon meetup in Germany or somewhere else and see what's going on there and get some interesting talks there. I'm a tinkerer. I like to build these freestanding full-size arcade cabinets. I'll talk to you ad nauseum about that if you're interested. And most importantly on this slide, who plays Dungeons and Dragons here? Anybody? All right, a fair amount, more than I usually get. In Dungeons and Dragons, my alignment is chaotic neutral. What that means is I like to mess around with people. I like to cause chaos, but not destruction. So maybe we're walking through the forest and we think maybe there's some monsters around, and for no good reason, I'll trip somebody in my party. And we have to roll dice and see what the outcome of that is. It's annoying as hell to everybody else, but it's hilarious to me. But I try to do no real harm, and it turns out that for hacking and for things like CTFs, that kind of alignment is actually really useful because most CTF challenges require some level of outside-the-box thinking, something that isn't obvious at face value. And we're going to be talking about a bunch of those skills as we go through here today. So our agenda, we're going to talk about what the purpose of CTFs are. What is this thing we call a flag? We have a couple of challenges, and the way we're going to do it, it's an iterative approach to these challenges. One's easier than the other. The first one's easier than the other. And what we're going to do is introduce the challenge and go over some of the hints that we've been given from the challenge. And then I'm going to give you time to work on it. And I'll answer questions and we can help each other. No spoilers, though. And then I'll give you a hint. And then we'll give you some more time to work on it. And then I'll present the solution. So we're going to do that for these two challenges, and then we'll talk about other CTFs and what's coming up. So what's the point of CTFs? Well, for somebody like me, and maybe you're this way too, I'm super curious about different systems, and CTFs are very cross-functional. Sometimes they focus on a particular language. Often they focus on different types of databases or protocols. WebSockets. Maybe you've never done anything with WebSockets, but maybe there's a challenge that if you do a little digging and find out something about WebSockets, it'll help you with that challenge. It's also really exercises your critical thinking skills. So a lot of times there are these little clues, little breadcrumbs that are kind of peppered around the CTF, and you can find out more about what you're doing, but you can keep the game fun by avoiding direct spoiler. So if you do a Google search for Snyk invisible ink solution, you're going to get it. That's probably not what you want if you're engaged in kind of playing this game the way it's meant to be played. It's also an opportunity to socialize with our peers and maybe some people from across the world we don't even know. Oftentimes, you're required to create a team or be on a team, and that's actually an advantage because then you get some cross-disciplinary skills within your team where maybe you know a ton about Python, but now you have a Go problem. Well, maybe there's somebody else on your team who knows more about Go than you and can help resolve some of these things, and it makes it a lot of fun that way. At the end, I'll talk to you about Fetch the Flag, which is Snyk's kind of flagship CTF. That's happening next week, and for that one, you need to either create your own team and invite people to it, or be on a team. And you can have a team of one, that's fine, but you'll have more fun if you get onto a team with some people. All right, what's a flag? So how many people here have ever participated at all in a CTF? All right, yeah, I would say about half, maybe third, maybe half. So in all CTFs, the F is for flag. And, my experience as a kid, maybe you had a similar experience, we would play like flag football, and there was like a physical piece of cloth somewhere that you had to get and bring somewhere. Well, this is a digital version of that. So at some point, to solve a challenge, you need the system to give you this bit of text that we call a flag. And in the case of Snyk's challenges, they're going to start with the word Snyk. They're going to have these curly braces and have this long, random looking number in it. Now, this number on the screen is not an actual flag. If you're like me, I would be screenshotting this and kind of feverishly typing it in and seeing if it's a real flag. So I just want to save you a little bit of effort. It's not. But when you get the system to reveal the flag to you, and that can be done in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes it's looking at the contents of a file. Sometimes it's hitting an endpoint in just the right way and it responds with the flag. But when you see that Snyk with the set of curly braces, you have revealed a flag, you copy and paste it into the input, and then you get whatever points are associated with that challenge. In this case, there is a real challenge called Magician. We're not going to be doing it today, but in this case, you drop the flag in here, click Submit, and then you get your 50 points. All right, a couple of rules of engagement. Now, usually I do this exclusively online. In fact, I did this earlier today, and there were like 1,300 people on Zoom. It was wild. But, so, you're not going to share your progress in chat, but it's okay to team up with people around you, share your progress without giving spoilers, but just say, oh, hey, I think I found out this interesting thing about JavaScript that may help. That's totally acceptable and encouraged. We want this to be a collaborative effort. You can ask questions. There is no Q&A area, but ask questions of me, of the people next to you. I'll answer questions as long as it's not going to be a direct spoiler. DM each other. This is IRL, so that means DMing means turning to the person to your left and saying something. Raise your hand. You're not muted, so you can just raise your hand and jump in or just interrupt. But the don'ts are important. We definitely don't want anybody calling out spoilers. And most importantly, and this is true of pretty much all CTFs, there's never there's never a situation where you're going to reveal the flag by hacking the back end, like by doing a denial of service attack or trying to crash the system. That's not the spirit of how these things work. And usually they're running on very lean instances out in the cloud somewhere that's costing somebody money. And that's the case with these challenges. So you won't get the flag by crashing my invisible ink server. You'll just make it annoying for everybody else. And that, I think, would fall under the category of chaotic evil, not chaotic neutral. So don't be chaotic evil. Do be chaotic neutral at least. Chaotic good is kind of boring, I think, but you know, we can talk about that more later. But the TLDR is don't hack the back end. That won't give you the solution anyway. All right, I'm going to put this slide up one more time. So some sort of text editor, doesn't matter which, Node.js, Python, curl. You can register if you want. This is not a requirement, but if you want to engage in the game and get the flags and get the points, you want to register at 101.ctf-snyk.io. You can register for Snyk using this link here, and that's a free forever account. The only restriction we have on our developer tier is the number of scans you can do in a month, but it's, you know, it's pretty generous for developers, and you can kind of kick the tires on Snyk. Again, not a requirement, but it will help you with our first challenge. And then you can join us on Discord. All right, is there anybody that still needs this slide up? All right, we're going to move on. Okay, so let's look at our first challenge. So this is the interface. It should look exactly the same for you, except you won't see admin panel. Other than that, you should be able to go to challenges here and then click our first challenge, invisible link. And when you're jumping into a CTF for the first time, it may not be obvious, but you want to look for clues that are given to you like right away through the challenge itself. Oftentimes, there are little breadcrumbs that help you solve it, and so you want to be a little bit like Sherlock Holmes here and do a little sleuthing. So first of all, we're given the language here. Now, it's not always a language-based challenge. This one is, so we know it's JavaScript. So if you have a member of your team who's a super JavaScript developer, you have an advantage. If you're not a JavaScript developer, it doesn't mean that you won't get it. It just means that you might have to do a little more sleuthing than somebody who is a JavaScript developer. Expose hidden vulnerabilities in the web application, and then we have a link here. Now we're going to come back to this page, but if you follow the link, you end up here, and there's a lot of juicy information on this page that we're going to come back to in just a second. But also, we have these files, index.js and package.json. Now that's not always the case. It's not always the case that you get the source files, and CTFs do a lot of misdirects, so you have to be careful. This looks like it's the source files for this website, but it might not be. It could be a misdirect, but you definitely want to download these files and check them out. And then finally we have a hint. Now sometimes in a CTF, it costs you points to look at a hint. And if that's the case, it'll tell you that that's the case. It'll say, you'll get a little warning saying, you know, this is going to shave 10 points off. That's not the case for this, and we can all just look at the hint. And the hint, if I can click properly, why am I not seeing the hint? This is called the demo monster. Hold on, I'm going to reload this. Invisible link, view hint, there we go. So the hint is a link to how you go about installing Snyk. So for this particular challenge, having Snyk installed is going to help, but again, not required. I'm going to show you what the Snyk scan looks like anyway and how it helps us when we get to the first hint. But let's just review what we already know. So we already know that there's a website associated with this challenge. We're going to look at that in more detail. We already know that it's a JavaScript-based challenge. We've been given 2 files. We definitely want to dig into those and see what kind of hints we get from that. We know that we're dealing with HTTP, so in case you're not entirely familiar with HTTP, we have these methods, get, post, and delete. That's how you interact with this on the web every day. You just might not be aware of what's going on behind the scenes. And so getting is typically reading, posting is typically writing, deleting is typically deleting. So we want to keep that in mind because we're going to be doing some HTTP interaction. And then we got this hint about the Snyk CLI. Now let's go dig into the juicy hints that were given directly on this page. So we need to make a post, that's a type of HTTP request, to this endpoint called echo. And we want to make sure that there's a header content type application JSON. And it's telling us that if we send along a request body, this JSON request body, we can expect to get a response that looks like this. So the first thing we want to do is just make sure that we can interact basically with this site as described here. And so I'm going to, who's used curl before? Yeah, most of us, right? You can use any HTTP client. You could use Postman or whatever you're comfortable with. Curl just happens to come on the Mac. My preferred HTTP client is HTTPie. If you've ever seen that, httpi.org, it's awesome. So we know that we're going to start here, but we're going to this echo endpoint. We know that it has to be a post. We know that we need this header, content type, application, JSON. And, I'm going to be typing live here, so I'm almost certainly going to make a mistake as we go, but let's see how we do. Let me get rid of that for a second. Okay, I'm going to bring this on another line just for readability. You don't have to do this the way that I'm doing it. You can do it all in one line. Okay, so this is the endpoint that we're going to hit. And then we need to give it some JSON. I'm just going straight off of what this website told me to do. Right? Everybody clear on what I'm typing here? And now I have an expectation, if I type it correctly, that I get back a response that kind of looks like what it said I should get back. So that's kind of like MVP here. We got to make sure that we can interact with the website in the way that we've been told that we should be able to interact with it. Now again, there's a lot of misdirects in CTFs. So if we got something unexpected back, that might be another clue all by itself. But in this case, we got back exactly what it told us we would get back. And what tickles my little chaotic neutral brain here is that we're playing a CTF. The F stands for flag, and there's an element in this response that includes a key called flag. I'm going to file that away as something relevant to kind of investigate further as we go through here. All right. Bear with me a sec. I'm just looking at my my cheat sheets here. Okay, couple other things before I turn it over to you. For I'm going to set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes and let you work on it, and then we'll go from there. We got these files. Now I added a couple of other files, but the files that we got are index.js and package.json. And if you've worked with Node.js before, the first thing I'm going to do is just run npm install to make sure that I have the packages that that this requires. And it's interesting because npm itself is telling me that there's a critical vulnerability. In the context of a CTF, you want to see stuff like that. That means that there's some vulnerability that we can exploit. Now we can go further. Actually, before we go further, let's just take a look at some of these files. We were given two files, package.json. Package.json describes the vulnerabilities that we have, and there is kind of an accidental little information leak here, but we can see that we're using Lodash, Express, and Body Parser. So that's a data point. Maybe these packages have vulnerabilities, and I kind of am showing you here that Lodash has a flotilla of vulnerabilities we want to probably exploit. And if I look at index.js, even if I'm not like terrifically familiar with this Lodash library, one of my JavaScript friends can tell me, okay, this is a library that's being referenced by the underscore character, and there's some interesting thing that's happening. I want to look for the occurrences of that underscore character, and kind of the only place we're using it is on line 25, where we're taking an unsanitized request body and passing it into a merge function. Whoops, there we go. So sometimes Visual Studio Code tries to help too much. So these are all data points, right? They're kind of swimming around in my head. I got this thing, Lodash, I got this merge function. I see that it's, I'm mainly a Java developer, but I know unsanitized input when I see it. So I see that there's a request body going in here. I've been told by npm that there's a critical vulnerability. Now I'm going to take advantage of the hint that I was given from Snyk, and I'm just going to run a test which might reveal to me some further information. Spoiler alert, in this case it will. So NPM gave me some, very high level information. Snyk is giving me some very specific information about the vulnerabilities related to Lodash, and it's showing me that the thing that I see most often is prototype pollution. Now let's imagine, I don't even know what that means. Maybe you don't even know what that means. But this gives you a lot of meat to go and search on. We have a lot of stuff to look on. We have Lodash exploit. I'm just throwing out some possible Google searches there. We have prototype pollution. Maybe I just want to find out what that even is if I'm not familiar with it already in JavaScript. So we have a lot of hints directly from this small bit of work that we did just to kind of poke around and see what's going on. So I'm going to put 10 minutes up on the clock here. Bear with me a second while I do that. And I'm happy to roam around and ask any questions, answer any questions you may have, but I want to encourage you to ask questions of each other and share progress with each other. So I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock, and if more than half of the room has solved it, I'm going to stop the clock and move on to the hint phase. But if you're all still working on it, that's fine. So in about 5 minutes, I'm just going to ask for a show of hands of how many people have solved it. But for now, I can be the floater here and just call me over if you need some assistance. I'm just going to keep my timer here where I can see it. Feel free to call me over. I'm just going to take a quick look at the Discord. Also, while you're working, I just want to express some gratitude here because this is the last session on the last day of a conference, and you are all here, and I appreciate that. And I just lost my CTF view. Where are you? All right, we're 30 seconds away from being halfway through. So how many people have solved it so far? All right, let's press on. We're doing great. We're gonna show a hint in about 5 minutes. What's that? The challenges here, we leave them up. So you'll be able to come back here and play around with them some more. And all right, about 2.5 more minutes, and then we'll take a look at our hint. One thing I will say about CTFs that you may or may not know is that they are often tough, and half the fun for me is just participating. And I would say on a real professional type CTF, I get about 1/3 of them, and I am totally happy with that. Now, I have friends that compete and win and solve all the challenges. That's not me. I am very happy with 30 to 40%. Collaboration is encouraged. All right, let's take a look at a hint here. So, how many people know what prototype pollution is? All right, one of us, that's fine. So let's go take a look at what the heck this thing called prototype pollution is. Did you get it? Yeah. Nice, well done. Get those 50 points. All right, prototype pollution. I don't know, let's, Snyk is the second link here, but let's not be biased. I'll go to the first link I got, which is prototype pollution, the dangerous and underrated something or other. Right. So again, like when I'm doing a CTF, you want to move around quick. You don't want to get stuck. I'm not going to read this entire article. I just want to get a sense of what it is. So I'm kind of scrolling around here, and this is interesting. Underscore, underscore, proto, underscore, underscore. How many people have seen that before in JavaScript? Some of us, right? So JavaScript is a prototypical style language compared to, say, Java, which is a class-oriented language. And there are big differences between them, but we can kind of think of the JavaScript prototype the way we might think of a class in C# or Java. It's kind of the blueprint for the objects that we're going to be using. And the point here is that this example is changing the behavior of the blueprint of an object. So it's changing the definition of what the toString function does to do something different. And so now when we call customer.toString, an alert pops up that says polluted, right? So this gives me a nice big hint. Somehow or other, the underscore, underscore, proto, underscore, underscore is going to be involved. And what I also want to draw your attention to is in the report that we got from Snyk, for each of these prototype pollutions, we got a link to the vulnerability. So now, in preparing for this, I looked at all these links, but there's something worth looking at. They all have value, but there's something worth looking at with this particular link. Because this particular link, let me make it a little bigger, gives us some very specific examples of prototype pollution in the context of Lodash. So prototype pollution is a general problem with JavaScript. Lodash has a prototype pollution vulnerability, and if I look at the link provided by Snyk in this case, I get some more reconnaissance here. I get some more information. So again, I'm seeing this proto format, and I'm seeing how the prototype is being messed with here. And it calls out in particular the merge function. That tickles my brain cells a little bit. My chaotic neutral spidey sense is going off, because the only thing that we're really doing with Lodash in this application that we've been given the source code to is this merge operation. So if I read the code a little further, I see that in this if statement, if there's this flag, if somehow the flag option can be set to true, then this API is going to return the contents of the flag value. That's exactly what I want for this CTF. Now we saw that by default, it's returning disabled, right, in the initial message that we got. So we want to find some way to trick this backend into making the flag true, which our friends over here have done. All right, so there's your hint. I'm going to put another 5 minutes on the clock to give everybody else the opportunity to solve it. So prototype pollution, merge function, something with the flag, underscore, underscore, proto, underscore, underscore. That's what you want to mess around with. So another 5 minutes, and then we're going to review the solution together. So there will be spoilers after this 5 minutes. Just FYI. I know I have water around here somewhere. Again, if anybody wants a second pair of eyes, wants additional hints, that's what I'm here for. This is a team sport. All right, another 2 minutes, and then we'll get to the solution. Anybody else solve it? Haha, nice. All right, let's take a look at the solution together. Now, I only gave you 5 minutes. Anybody else want a little more time, or you're close, ready to hit the solution? All right, let's press on. Bear with me a sec here. Need my cheat sheet? All right. Let's see if I can construct what's going on here. So we're going to take this incoming body and we're going to merge it into this out object that's been created. So the out object already has user ID. It's already got, which is just a remote address. It's already got the time. Also coming in on the body, we saw earlier that we're passing in a message, so the message is automatically going to be merged in. So let's see. Let me get back to my curl command. Let's see what I can do here, and if I don't get it on the first try, I'll go and look at my cheat sheet to fix it. But I know that I want to mess around with this object prototype, and I want to embed in it a value of flag, and I don't want it to be a string, I want it to be a Boolean. I want it to be true, because once that flag is true, then the code as I saw it is going to spit back the value of this flag that it has saved internal to the application here. Let's see if I got it right on the first try. Did I get it right on the first try? Who are my solvers? Aha! So now instead of flag disabled, I get this flag back. And now I can go over here and I can paste it and submit it, and I get my 50 points. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, just as a data point, is that when you see the values of these points, it's not a linear progression, but something that's worth more points is generally speaking going to be a more challenging challenge. And so, you know, just technique-wise, when I do a CTF, I first look for things that are familiar. If something's explicitly Java, that's where I go to first, because that's really my best language. If something's explicitly HTTP, I'll go there first, because I'm really good with the HTTP protocol. If something looks like it's going to be easy or it's very low in points, I'll go there first, knock out a bunch of those 50 pointers, and then circle back to the higher point ones. So these are kind of like, it's almost like test-taking techniques in high school. Has nothing to do with the actual challenges, but it's just a way of getting through it. And in some cases, some CTFs will be time-boxed. I mean, they're all time-boxed usually, but sometimes they're across days. But if you only have a few hours, you want to go and grab that low-hanging fruit first. All right, so before we move on to our next challenge, are there any questions about this one? Now, I happen to be relatively good with JavaScript, so I kind of came into it knowing what prototype pollution was, knowing that Lodash had problems with previous versions of Lodash, had problems, security vulnerabilities. But if it was something that I completely didn't know anything about, Google is your friend as long as you're kind of playing the Google game where you're not looking for the specific result. But, you know, we saw in the search that I did, prototype pollution yielded some good stuff. All right, let's move on to our next one. Our next challenge is called sauerkraut, and we're going to do the same kind of exercise. First, we're going to gather information, some meta information, and hopefully pick up some clues. Now, first of all, we know that sauerkraut is worth 150 points. Does that mean it's 3 times as hard as invisible ink? Not really. You can't like quantify it that way, but we can say it's going to be harder than invisible ink was. So here are the clues we have. We know it's Python. We have this question, which is a funny question. What goes best on a hot dog? Well, I don't know, maybe you like sauerkraut. Maybe that's why it's called sauerkraut. But a lot of times these questions are misdirects. So what would be a weird thing to put on a hot dog? That's maybe something to think about. General kind of CTF 101 approaches here. Now this challenge also has a web address associated with it, but notice this time we don't get files. It was super handy to have the files to be able to see what libraries were in use, like Lodash. We don't have that this time, so that kind of naturally makes it a little more challenging. But we can look at this website, and this gives us some information back. Like I can see that there's a text area that's telling me to enter text. There's a submit button, and there's another text area that I don't know what it's for just yet. So let's review what we know. We know that we have this website. We have this question, what goes best on a hot dog? And questions in CTFs are rarely direct, so there might be some sort of a misdirect here. We know that the back end of this is written in Python. So now, how are we going to investigate? where are we going to start? Well, the first thing I like to do whenever I see a website that's requesting input is to view the source of the page, because sometimes, especially for a low point CTF challenge, sometimes the whole challenge is a misdirect and the flag is just sitting there in the source. Maybe it's encoded in some way, or maybe it's embedded in some JavaScript library. But sometimes we go off on this wild goose chase, and the solution is right there. So I'm going to take a look at the source. And spoiler alert, this is about the most simple HTML source there could be. This would have worked on a website in 1998 just fine, because it's very simple HTML. There's no JavaScript. There's nothing fancy going on here. There's nothing. There aren't any even hidden input fields. So it's a good technique. It's a good low-hanging fruit kind of approach to look at source. But in this particular case, it's not helping us out at all. So the next thing I want to do is take a look at what happens with this form itself. I know behind the scenes Python's involved, and I want to start from kind of a clean place. So I'm not going to alter anything on the page. I'm just going to click the submit button. That's a good place to start. Like, it already has something in the text area box up top. I don't know what the text area box in the bottom does yet. I'm just going to click submit. Well, this is a really good clue. This is really interesting. Invalid base64 encoded string. That tells me that it's expecting as input a base64 encoded string. That's an important data point. It's telling me that the input that I sent, which is enter text here, because that's what was sitting there, is invalid base64 encoded string. Good data point. Remember that. Everybody know what base64 encoding is? No? Yeah. So that's a great Google search. What the heck is base64 encoding? That's a good place to start. I also, just kind of being a chaotic neutral and looking for low-hanging fruit, there is some text that was on the page already. What happens if I submit that text? Now, I know it's looking for a base64 encoded string, but that could always be a misdirect. So I'm going to start with just kind of poking around with what I have, and I'm just going to copy the text that was there and see what I get. Well, that's interesting. Invalid load key. What the heck does that mean? I have no idea. And by the way, I know just enough Python to get myself in trouble. And when I was first working on this workshop here, we have a research team at Snyk that came up with these challenges, and then I went to go and solve them clean as if I was, going through it for the first time. And I had no idea what any of this meant. All I knew was that there was Python. I knew base64 encoding was somehow involved, and I had this invalid load key x17. I had no idea what that meant. But being good CTF sleuthers now, I'm going to literally take invalid load key and do a search for that. Well, before I do that, let's just look at base64 encoding. What the heck is that? I happen to know what that is, but it's not obvious and not everybody would know what that is. Wikipedia is a good source. Maybe it's too verbose. Representing blah, blah, blah. General strategy, too verbose. I want to move quick. What happens here? Well, let's see. If I type hello, this is very small. If I type hello and I encode it, well, that's interesting. I get this kind of text back. So that tells me that it's some way of encoding text. And if I do a little more poking around, and if you were to do a little more poking around, you'd find out that it's a way to take information, and it can be binary information, and give you a result that's always pure text, which makes it suitable for sending around the internet. So we can take binary information, blow it up, and end up with this text string that is suitable for passing around the internet easily. Next thing I want to look up is invalid load key. Now, I'm kind of thinking off the top of my head, well, this is going to be a ridiculous thing to search for. I mean, a ton of stuff is going to come back, but let's just see what we get. Well, take a look at this. Our very first bunch of hits have something to do with this thing called pickle. I have no idea what that is. Has something to do with Python, right? The very first hit has something to do with Python. So this turns out to be a really great clue, because I know that behind the scenes Python is being used here. So just by searching for what seems like kind of ordinary words, invalid load key, the very first bunch of hits that I get have to do with Python and have to do with this thing called pickling. I have absolutely no idea what Python and pickle are. And when I first came to this, I'd written some Python, but I had no idea what this pickling thing was. So I'm going to do a web search now for Python pickle. All right, very first hit is the documentation from Python on what the heck pickle is. Never thought I'd have to say pickle so many times in a professional setting. Well, this is great. This is, my chaotic neutral loves to see this. The pickle module is not secure. So apparently pickle is a module for object serialization in Python, and it's insecure. Who knows what serialization is? Object serialization. Yeah, a few of us, right? If you've ever done Java, now as a Java developer, serialization and deserialization has caused no shortage of problems for Java. So now I'm starting to get into a realm where I know something, and if I can serialize and deserialize Python objects, well, maybe I can exploit some sort of a vulnerability there. So for those of you that don't know, serializing and deserializing objects in general is the process of taking a runtime object and putting it into some sort of format that we can save to disk or save in a database or pass around. And then the act of deserialization kind of reconstitutes it as an object. But there's all kinds of ways to mess around with that. If you can mess around with that serialized data, you might be able to inject different properties into that serialized object. You may be able to flip a Boolean from false to true, and all of a sudden the object is behaving differently. All right, so this is a really good trove of hints that we get right out of the gate just by doing some simple Googling and looking at what we've already been given. And so I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock and turn this over to you all. And just like before, I'll give you the 10 minutes. You can ask me questions. I'll come over if you need a second pair of eyes, and then we'll get into a hint. Then we'll have some more time, and then we'll look at the solution. Thank you. Let's see, how we doing? All right, we're about at the halfway mark. Anybody solve it yet? Close? Anybody close? Yeah? All right, good, good. Keep going. All right, I appreciate all you intrepid CTFers. Keep hacking at it. Got about 3 more minutes and then we'll review a hint. All right, let's take a look at a hint, shall we? All right, so if you're like me, what do we know so far? We know that we're looking for some base 64 encoded input to the form. We know that we're dealing with Python. We have this serialization package that apparently is built into Python called pickle. And we know that that pickle is not secure by Python's own documentation. So the next thing I'm going to do is a search for Python pickle exploit. And survey says, get rid of all this stuff, exploiting Python pickles. Very first hit. It's from 2020, which is near enough that it's worth looking at. It's not like it's 2010 or something. By this author, David Heyman. And in the context of a CTF, I'm moving fast, so I'm not going to read this entire article. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to look for an exploit, an actual code exploit that is a proof of concept. And let's see, creating a vulnerable app, creating the exploit. Well, that looks like a very promising section to this blog post. So I didn't read the whole upper section. I'm not even sure I quite understand what's going on in this code, but it's all I need to make a start. And I can even see here at the bottom that it's going to base 64 encode the result. This is very promising to me. That's how we're going to serialize this binary data and output it in a friendly kind of format in base 64. Now, this command over here does look pretty complex to me. It's removing some files. It's doing this make FIFO utility command. I don't know exactly what that is. I know what NC is, netcat, but that's a lot more than I want to deal with. So I'm going to simplify the command, but I'm going to take this code as is and see how far I can get with it. And so, without any further ado, this is exactly that code that we were just looking at, but with the command greatly simplified. Instead of executing all of those different commands and piping them together, I'm going to execute a very simple command because as an attacker or as a participant in CTF, I really just want a foot in the door. I want to see if I'm making progress. And so if I run this command, and remember it's very important that it be Python 3, because there is the pickle module in Python 2, but it produces different results and it won't work right. So I made sure that my Python version is 3, and I'm going to run this code. And just as a reminder, what this code is going to produce is a base 64 encoded string that represents a serialized object. Now I learned earlier, because I didn't even know this, that this B single quote format is Python's binary representation or a string representation of a byte array. I didn't know that before. I'm not good enough with Python, but we want the stuff that's in between the single quotes. That's the important stuff. Now I'm going to take this base 64 encoded string and I'm going to paste it into my form. And if all goes well, I should see the output of who am I. This is what we call a remote code execution vulnerability. So I'm trying to trick this back-end system into executing what I tell it to. And in this case, I'm executing who am I. And if you're not familiar with that command, it works on Mac, it works on Linux. Who am I just tells you who the running user is. So on this Python backend, there's a running user, and I want to see if I can see who it is. So here we go. I hope you all believe in me. I'm submitting it. Well, that was anticlimactic. Let me try again, in case you missed it. Well, nothing. What does that tell me? Who thinks I've made progress? All right, good. I appreciate your belief in me. I think I've made progress too because I didn't get an error. Anything else that I've put in here has ended up being an error, and this time at least I didn't get an error. And if I take some random encoded, base 64 encoded string like the one where I said hello, and I paste that in here, I bet I get an error. Yeah, I get a 101. What does that even mean? So I think I've made some progress because at least I didn't get an error. But nothing was output. It should have been something like this. So now I need to do a search because I don't know what I'm looking at here. And when I first did this, I literally didn't know what I was looking at here. I need to do a search for how can I get Python to show me the output? Because it turns out that os.system will run the command, but it doesn't capture the output. I want to run a command where I can capture the output so that it gets displayed to me. And all of this is in service of eventually getting to a flag. So the next search that I'm going to do is, bear with me a second, here it is. And the reason that I'm copying this very specifically is because this is literally the search that I did when I was solving this the very first time. I did a search for Python running shell command and capturing the output. That is a ridiculous long search, but that's what I searched for. Because I knew that I was pretty confident that it was running, but I wasn't getting the output. So first hit is from October 2018. That's getting kind of oldish in internet years, but I want to look at it anyway. And part of what I learn here, because I don't even look at the question, I skip down to the answer. Well, part of the result here is using subprocess check output instead of os.system. Now, I am not well versed enough in Python to really know what the difference is, but this Stack Overflow post is telling me that if I use subprocess.checkOutput, I'm going to capture the output from whatever command I run. So in my next iteration of this, I switch out OS for subprocess. So I import subprocess instead of import OS, and I call subprocess.checkOutput. Come on, Visual Studio Code. I call subprocess.checkOutput instead of os.system. Everything else is exactly the same. So I'm going to run this again, and this is 1. I get some more base64 encoded output. I'm going to come over here and paste that in here. And lo and behold, now I get the output that I'm expecting from who am I. It's in this, encoded Python output thing, but I can extract what I want. So the back-end Python application is running as the user called user. Now that's some real progress. Now I have a foot in the door. Now I'm getting the system to run arbitrary commands. And now I may have everything that I need to get this blasted flag. All right, that's the big hint. I'm going to put another 5 minutes on the clock. Carry on. Let me know if you get it. Hoot and holler. Who got it? Nice. Well done. Anybody else solve it so far? It's all right. Keep at it. I just got water on my laptop. Laptops love liquid, right? just heard the common CTF call of frustration. All right, you got about 2 minutes left, and I'll check if people are close. If you still want more time, that's okay. We got the time. I believe in you. All right, got about 30 seconds left, and then I'll check in with y'all. Yeah. Anybody else close? Anybody want a few more minutes? Okay, a few more minutes. I'm going to put 3 more minutes on the clock. And then we'll go through the solution. Let me know if you need a second pair of eyes. Happy to jump in. Yeah. people ran into it is that if you have a multi-phrase command, like we were doing simple commands at first, like who am I? If it is a multi-phrase command, like there's a space in between, that needs to be set up as an array of strings. All right. So let's look at the solution together. Sounds like y'all are super close. So once I can run who am I can run other things like ls-l, right? But now this is a multi-phrase command, so this needs to be two separate strings inside of an array. So now, if I grab this, so now I see a bunch of files, and it's the formatting's a little weird, but look at this. Well, that looks promising. So close. So who knows the command for, I'm just backing this out because I want to save it. Who knows the command? Now that we can get the directory listing, what are we going to do to see the contents of that flag? Cat. That's right. So my final one is cat flag. It's inside of an array. And so I'm going to do Python exploit flag final. ls by itself would work, by the way, in the original format because that's a single command. But if you want ls-l, it's got to be an array. And now, here's my flag. Huzzah! Thank you. I can paste that there, and I get my 150 points. All right, so first of all, I want to congratulate you all, whether you got it or didn't get it. You stuck with it, and that's the way these CTFs are. They're maddeningly fun. They're frustratingly awesome. So a couple of resources here, and you might want to take a picture of this. I think I send the organizers my slide decks after, but I'm not 100% sure, so just in case. Snyk did a CTF challenge last year that had 24 challenges, and that is still running. You can go there and register and play around with these 24 challenges. That's ctf-2021.snyk.io. Then there are all these great organizations that run CTF challenges all the time. So CTF101.org, Hacker 101, Pico CTF, they're always running challenges, and most of them have their own Discord communities associated with them. Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, CTF Time, those are all additional ones. Anybody need to take a picture before I switch? Got it. Good. Okay. Our DevSecCon Discord community, maybe you joined that as part of this, maybe you didn't, but that covers Snyk's community, DevSecCon community, and a bunch of other things. It's a really great environment. And big punchline, a week from today, we're going to have a new Fetch the Flag event for 2022 that has 16 all-new challenges. So there'll be different challenges from the one that you'll find from last year. So snyk.io/CTF is how you sign up for that. It's on November 9th. It's a 6-hour event, so it is time-boxed. So like I was saying earlier, you want to look for that low-hanging fruit, grab the challenges you think you can get done the quickest. And with that, I thank you. I'd love to meet you all on Twitter if you are there. And this is my Twitter handle. And you've been great. Thanks for coming here at the end of the conference. Thank you very much.